lots of new handle forms to make new plaster molds for slip casting handles. Hi, I'm Kent. I've been busy recently on my software for Shapecast and making handles, which is why there haven't been too many videos. I've went and designed a whole bunch of different handle types, and those are now live on the Shapecast webpage. Up until now, I've really only had two forms on Shapecast, and that's these two here. This one here was the first one, and this one's the second one. Makes handles like this. This is also on a Shapecast form when I have up there on the gallery. And here are a couple more. These are ones I just pulled out of the bisque that show the different handles. I've also been playing around with a third handle type. It's actually this one here. And I have it on this mug. Up until recently though, you could only get this if you emailed me, but now it's available online, as are the rest of these. So in this video, I'm going to go ahead and make a whole bunch more molds using a lot of these different handle forms. The Shapecast handle molds basically look like this. There are two types. This one here is for symmetric handles. Basically, they're the same top to bottom. So if I take this form here and I flip it upside down, and it's exactly the same. That means you can use the 3D prints twice because the pieces are exactly copies of each other. The two halves are identical. Or there's two distinct halves. So this one here, obviously, if you flipped it upside down, would not be the same. So that's this mold here. And these are close, but not quite mirrors of each other. The mold keys in particular, the notches are different. I designed these with a variety of forms in mind. Some of them are bigger and smaller. On the Shapecast webpage, they kind of all look the same size because I've zoomed in so that they fill up the whole image. Although some of these are much more petite, like this one, compared to this one, which is a little bit more thick. This one's very thin. This one's very thin as well. This one's a little bit more chunky. All these come in a range of sizes. I have 10 variations for each. So this here is just kind of a representative example. So these are all design proofs. These are included with the files that you get. And I've just printed those out to get a good sense of the sizes. When you get the files, the handle mold comes in 4 pieces. These 4 in particular. So there's the bottom plate, and this has some geometry baked into it to receive the handle mold part itself. So if you look very closely, there's a small little step down here. And this piece here is designed to exactly fit in here. It doesn't go all the way through, it sits on that little step. And often it's a little bit snug. I've printed some of these and had a little bit of problems where the elephant foot, basically the bottom layer, expands out. And if that's the case, just take a knife and shave it back just a tiny bit. But you want it snug. And then there's 2 outer walls. So there's these little locating pins, and these are loose on purpose, but they're to kind of get you a rough alignment. And some associated holes. So that goes on there. And the other piece has some cutouts for the feed portion of the handle. So basically sits around here. And the form for the handle actually is intentionally closed off in the end because the connection between the wall and the handle form isn't actually plaster tight. There's usually a little bit of plaster leaks in there, but that way with the end piece here, it can't leak inside the mold. And so you'll notice this form here is not symmetric, so it has 2 distinct halves. So there's an opposite half as well. So it's exactly like this. We'll connect this all together, which I'll do in just a minute. We'll then pour plaster, and the end result is something like this, only with our new form. I did make one change in doing this redesign. Basically, it took a fair amount of effort. One is getting all the different forms themselves and being able to generate the handle forms. There's some trickiness around basically the path the handle goes around and the curve, the cross-section profile as well, and getting that to all work, which is why it's not quite general purpose yet. But one of the things I did while I was in there changing things up is I added these little tabs here. And that's so we can use binder clips here and around the bottom, so we don't need to tape all of it. The other work I did was really on the Shapecast website itself. The original handles page was rather bare bones since I only had the 2 handles. And I've gone and redesigned it completely. So if you go there, you'll see something like this. It shows all the different handle profiles. So this one here that we're going to be working on. This one. A few were meant for things like teacups. I don't really have forms for this right now, but if you make your own, it's a good shape. Some other interesting ones. This one. There we go. And I went and named them all. So they now have names instead of more descriptions. I wound up with too many to describe them all, so I picked names. And then the overview also has things like the sizes. If you go into the details page for each of these, there's a whole bunch of renderings of each of these. These are actually computer graphics renderings. I had to figure that out. I couldn't take pictures of all of these, so I needed something to show you. On the details page, it shows you what the handle looks like. Basically something like this image here. It shows a rendering of the plaster, something like that. Shows renderings of the molds in orange, of course, because I print everything in orange so you guys can see it on camera. And then it shows each of the different size variations. So this was the other really big piece of work that I've been doing recently, is getting the web page into a much better shape. Hopefully it's much easier for you guys to use as well. If you want, you can finish the surface of the handle piece itself. This will transfer into the plaster. For me, these are just straight off the printer, but you can prime and sand if you want. I found that in general, by the time I have done attaching the handle and sponge it down and everything else, most of the artifacts disappear. But of course, do whatever you want. Just be careful of the tolerances, because in particular, they need to fit down in here and be plaster tight. The first piece that gets attached is this one here. Should kind of click down in there. And then there's a groove in the back, and that groove is so that we can, one, flex it to get it out of the plaster, but also it provides an area where we can attach these two pieces together. So I've been using this here. It's called tuck tape. It's a sheathing product. It's meant to be very sticky and waterproof. That way the plaster doesn't loosen the adhesive. Other things would probably work as well, but I've been using this. And then I cut off some little pieces and kind of push it down inside the handle form and around the bottom. Make sure it's nice and snug. You want to look and make sure there's no gap between that handle piece and the bottom piece. And then tape it down in a few places. So I like to do the ends, and then here, kind of in the middle. And I found something skinny is useful to get in there to help press down the tape. There you go, that's probably good enough. If you want, you can tape the whole seam if you're worried about plaster leaking. I have not had it be a problem, but it really depends on your printer and the quality of your prints and everything else. All right, so that's good. So now do we attach these outer walls? And I got a bunch of binder clips that I've been using for the regular shape cast vessel molds. So line up the two ends so that they're nice and even. And put a handful of binder clips around the outside. Just like that. If you want, you can add more or less. Really use your own judgment there. For me, I found this is pretty good. The other thing I've noticed is that sometimes the 3D prints aren't completely flat coming off the print bed. They'll warp a little bit, particularly this bottom piece. And by using the binder clips with this wall here, the wall itself helps straighten everything out. If yours is really warped, that might be a problem, but there's just a little bit of bend to it. I think this form probably helps. This one I went ahead and taped down, so I just need to add the binder clips. I don't put any release agent on these. I haven't found that's really needed and can sometimes cause more harm than good. Since these use two distinct halves, I needed to do the printout twice, so we have a total of 8 pieces. If this were symmetrical and use identical halves, you have two options. One is you can go ahead and print out 2 copies and pour the plaster at once, or you can print out 1 copy, pour the plaster, demold it, and then pour a second batch of plaster as well. I tend to go ahead and do the second print since I don't really like mixing and in particular cleaning up after plaster. That way I can just do it all in one batch. The mold's all prepped. Next up is plaster, and we need to figure out how much plaster we need to mix up, and luckily Shapecast does all of that for you. These are pretty easy. They're all rectangular, so you can just measure the width, length, and height, and then multiply. But I go ahead and do that math for you. And then you also need the ratio of dry plaster to water, and it puts out that number. Basically goes and calculates all those things, rounds up a little bit, and then spits out numbers for plaster and water. I use USG #1 Pottery plaster. This might vary a little bit if you use a different plaster, but it's probably a good starting point. And it uses a ratio of 100 parts of dry plaster to 70 parts of water by weight. So I think we're ready, except I have so many different handles. In particular, I have all of these that I don't think I just want to do one mold. I want to do a bunch. So this one I already have, this one I already have, and this one I already have. This one here we've been working on. I think I'm going to do all the ones that I have forms that kind of make sense for. And that will leave out these two. I think these are more kind of teacup style, English teacup style, and I don't have forms for these. So let's do, in addition to this one, these other 5. There we go. My printer has been busy. And I went ahead and off camera prepped all of these so they're basically in the same point. I take them all up, I put on the binder clips, and we're good to go. While I'm here, one of the suggestions I get from time to time when I show demolding the handles, which we'll do later, is putting something on the inside to help pull it out. And the problem is some of these handles are really narrow, so it's really hard to get something down in there. So I don't think that was necessarily obvious with the existing designs, but with these new ones, it definitely is a challenge. And of course, Shapecast spit out the volume information for all of these as well. So now I went ahead and measured out that plaster. So here's the water. And here's the plaster. Actually, here's most of the plaster. This is going to be a very big plaster pour. Might be a little bit crazy for attempting to do this in one go, but I figured might as well. You probably only want to attempt to pour this big if you already have a fair bit of experience with plaster. All right, so I just put down some boards. I haven't had any problems with the molds leaking. However, I do have a problem with me spilling. So that's really there just to protect my bench. For smaller volumes of plaster, I've been using this. This is just a kitchen sieve that's motorized. Basically, it'll sprinkle the plaster down. However, since I have so much plaster, I'm not going to use it. The advantage of having so much plaster, though, is that I can mix it really, really well. Mixing small quantities of plaster is actually a little bit hard because you tend to mix air into it. By having a larger volume, it should be a lot easier. I do have my mixer all ready and my drill ready as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the dry and put it onto the wet, let it slake for 3.5 minutes. I'll then let it pour for 4 minutes, then I'll go and pour all of the molds. This is probably going to be a little bit chaotic trying to pour all these in a quick succession, so I probably won't be talking too much. The other thing here I have is an old brush, and I'll use that once the plaster molds are full to basically go and dab and try and release any of the bubbles, mostly around the handle area. The rest doesn't matter so much. All right, one last check. Make sure I got everything ready. Let me move some things around so I can get to them easier. All right, let's go ahead and go. 3.5 minutes once I dump in all the plaster. At this point, you don't want to mix it. You really just want the plaster to start hydrating. As soon as you start mixing, it will start the chemical reaction. Some magic there I don't really understand. It's about basically the strength of the mixing impacts the strength of the plaster and starts the setting process. We do, however, want everything in the water. All right, mix for 4. All right, 4 minutes. I have the race against the clock. See, I spill. These are looking pretty good. All right, there we go. I wouldn't say it was the most graceful pour ever, but I think it worked. Some of them are a little bit shy, but I think I have enough plaster in there. And it's definitely starting to set. So I'm gonna go wash off the tools. The bucket I will leave for later once it sets, and then we'll have a bit of a mess to clean up. Okay, it's been a solid hour and the plaster is all cured now. So I'm gonna demold these in 2 stages. First, I'm gonna take the outer walls off and clean up the mess, and then we'll deal with the inner part later. I'm gonna start demolding. Take all the binder clips off, throw them in. And this is from me spilling over the edge. All right, there are all the binder clips. Oh, missed one. Now all the binder clips. So now we can go and take all the tape off. This tape is super sticky. And then it should just demold. So the bottom will come off, just like that, and good, no voids. And then the 2 outside walls go sideways, because they're nice and rounded over. Just like that. I didn't feel quite at the top, so there's a sharp corner here. So the plaster's still reasonably soft at this point. All right, there we go. I'm gonna go ahead and leave this piece in now so the plaster can set longer. So let me go ahead and do this to the rest of them. And you can see on this one, we leaked just a tiny bit. Right there, but it should be fine. All right, there we go. Everything is demolded and they all looked good. I didn't notice any voids in the surface. That's great. I didn't really see any bubbles either. And as for the mold parts, basically these can be washed off and reused. What I'll do is basically dunk them in water and use like a kitchen scrub brush and just brush all the plaster off. So you can make many, many handle copies if you wish. All right, next I'm gonna go ahead and clean up the rest of this plaster mess. All right, there we go, much better. All right, so I've left the inner piece in all of these molds. I have demolded them at this point, but sometimes it'll chip out. Basically, there's a sharp corner between the flat face of the mold where they mate together and it going down into the handle. And in general, plaster doesn't like right angles. It's very fragile there. So I think I'm gonna do is actually let these sit overnight and then come back to them tomorrow and we'll demold them then. Basically, plaster gets harder for the first hour or so, basically as it cures, and then as it dries and continues to cure, it gradually gets stronger and stronger, and it reaches maximum strength when it's fully dry. So I'm gonna give these more time so that they firm up some more. But overall, these look really good. The backs were a little bit underfilled, as I mentioned, but that's because I was trying to do way too many at once. Some of these are a little thin, and I think that's a combination of 2 things. One, I did slightly under pour, but some of these handles are just much thinner than I normally make. But I don't anticipate any problems with those at all. So basically I'm gonna stand all these up so they can dry. All right, I'm gonna go clean up a few more things and then tomorrow we'll be back and we'll finish demolding these. It's actually been 2 days and the plaster is still a little bit damp, but I think it has cured a lot more. Actually off camera, I went ahead and did a couple of tests. I did one yesterday and I had a little bit of chip out, and I did one today and it's looking much better. So let's go ahead and take out the last piece of the molds. So the wall on this part of the mold is intentionally very thin, and so we can flex it a little bit. Usually I like to grab it by the feed here. Give it a little bit of a wiggle. Be careful, this plaster right on the edge is very fragile. And it came out just like that. Nice crisp edge. Now I get to play the game of finding the mating piece since I mixed them all up. All right, this one here. Perfect. Just like that, one new handle mold. Flip them around. So these here are the mold notches. These are for rough alignment. I'll put it together just like that. And we'll pour slip into one or the other of the holes. It'll fill up, we'll cast it solid, and make a new handle for this form. Let me do the others real quick. This is the one we started with. These aren't quite sitting flat because I didn't fill them all the way. But you never have them in this orientation, really. All right, so sometimes they're a little bit stuck and hard to grab onto. So I have a pair of needle nose pliers that I just very gently pull. And this one broke a little bit. So we have a little bit of chip out on that, but in my experience, that'll barely show up since we'll have a little bit of flash anyway, so it'll clean up. There we go. Another. All right, and there we go, 6 new handle molds. Just like that. As I mentioned, there's a little bit of chip out in some of these. I think it was a good idea to wait. So if you have the patience to let the plaster cure, go ahead and do that. This is still a bit damp, so I probably could have even let it sit longer. And this is just regular PLA. Several people have suggested other filaments as well. I tried PETG a little while ago, but I was having some problems with it. This might also be a good use for TPU for that inner piece as well, especially the new stiffer TPU that can go through the AMS systems. But with a little bit of patience, this works just fine. And if anything, ceramics is good at teaching patience. So these are going to take a few more days to dry out, but I can't end it here. So let me go ahead and grab one of the other new forms that I put up on Shapecast that you guys haven't had access to yet, and go ahead and slip cast that one. In the meantime, go ahead and put all these together, rubber band them up, let them finish drying. So this mold here is exactly this form here. I made this one a while ago. So to slip cast these, basically just assemble the mold together. Take a rubber band. I like to spread them out so the clamping force is evenly distributed. And then you need to look down inside and get everything lined up, because it can be shifted just a little bit. Just like that. And we'll just pour slip into here. So let me mix up my slip real quick and we'll do that. So I like to take a little bit of slip in a container so I can pour it in. Basically just going to pour it into the feed in one side. Doesn't really matter which side. It'll self-level. Or you can top up the other side, either way. And then I slip cast these handles solid. Usually what I do is I go and slip cast my handle and my pots at the same time. That way they are basically the same level of wetness. After about half an hour, I dump out the excess slip in my pots, but I leave the handles. There's still usually a little bit of slip in the top above the level of the handle itself, and let them continue to absorb the water. And then when it comes time to demold the pots, I dump any excess slip out of the end of the handle. I then open up the mold, pull out the handle, cut off the ends, slip it, and attach it to the pot. In a recent video, I just made some muds, so let me show you what that looks like real quick. So there we go, a whole bunch of new Shapecast handle forms that are up on the Shapecast website, and some brand new handle molds. When I first did handles, it was rather intimidating, but now that I have these molds, it actually is relatively straightforward. And with Shapecast, basically all the pieces come together. You don't have to worry about making the master or cauldle boards or any of that stuff. I'm going to go ahead and let my plaster molds dry out the rest of the way. It's going to probably take at least a few more days. And then the next video, we'll go ahead and slipcast all these new handles, attach them to pots, and make a whole bunch more mugs. If you have any questions or comments, let me know. Thanks.